Oh, shit, I watched the wrong movie. I thought we were supposed to watch Signs.
We tried to watch a Mel Gibson movie the other day, and a transformer blew up. And I said it was a sign from God that we shouldn't watch it.
Which Transformer blew up?
Bumblebee. Arizona, July 1947. A sleepy little town by the name of Roswell is forever changed after it becomes the topic of national conversation when an object of unknown origin is reported to have crashed and been seized by the government. New Jersey, December 2024. Numerous accounts of mysterious drone-like devices being spotted begin flooding in from all over the state, with video evidence to back the claims that something mysterious is afoot. While these may be the most famous and the most recent instances of our collective interest in UFOs, or unidentified flying objects, today's episode begins in Monterey Bay, California, October 2013, where a man by the name of Christo Roppolo reports to us that, well, a UFO he spotted was directly responsible for causing him to unexpectedly evacuate his bowels on a public golf course. For all things that make you feel sad, bad, or generally just not rad, this is Existential Shred.
Good old Christo.
He rules.
I love
love
cool.
Christo. So this is a shred first because we're doing a documentary today. Not a fictional story, not an album, but an actual factual documentary.
I had trouble telling if it was an actual documentary after that first opening scene where he talks about literally almost shitting himself.
Yeah, I don't remember how I came upon this. It's a 2016 documentary by a man named Justin Garr. And if you try to find any kind of information with like movies, it's really easy to find information about like production, stuff like that. There's not a lot of information about this because it's just a documentary. So you're getting a lot of the information up front.
And it honestly just seems like a guy with a camera, like more than anything.
He says in the movie, like he was working as a video editor and he got contacted by our main character, Christo Roppolo, which I've said his name 2 different times now. I don't really know how to say his last name. So
might be Roppolo, might be Roppolo.
Yeah, I'm just going to say his name's Christo because it is. Before we get into it, now you haven't seen this before.
I have not.
In preparation, I had asked you yesterday before you watched it to send me a quick little blurb about how you feel about aliens or if you believe in them. Instead of reading it, I'll just let you surmise.
I believe that life exists out there on different planets. There's no way that we're the one, outlier in all of the galaxies and universes. There's no possible way that we're the only one. But I don't think that there's been any true contact made in my mind because I feel like it wouldn't be so hidden if that were the case. Not on our end, but on their end, it wouldn't be so sneaky. But it also, I say it just scares me because that means that they're more advanced than us. They can travel between star systems and universes, galaxies, and that scares me. So I choose to be afraid and not believe.
That's fair. Yeah, my personal belief kind of boils down to it's 2-pronged, where it's the practical and then the personal. On the practical side of it, I agree. It's one of the infinitesimal nature of the universe. It would be difficult or impossible to say that there isn't some kind of other intelligent life, whether that's microbes or whatever, something human-like or something we don't know.
I think it's just improbable that it wouldn't exist.
Yeah, there's more than a 0% possibility.
Yeah.
Potentially, realistically. But my personal belief is, and it's because I think it's cooler, is that we are the outlier. Is that we just happen to be in the best conditions.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think that's the cooler version. So that's the one I kind of go with until I'm presented with evidence.
Yeah.
One of the big things, it's called Curse of the Man Who Sees UFOs. So obviously you're kind of brought in because it's this man who claims he sees these UFOs. It begins very easily to just be along for the ride as this man tries to convince you of UFOs or it's like a case study essentially. But then you start to learn more and more about him and the tragedy of his life and how this is kind of meaningful to him. And I think that's really beautiful. And then also the first time I watched it, I kind of was like, oh man, he has some strange evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, he has a lot of strange evidence.
Which is kind of, I guess, to kick it off. The reason I wanted to ask you what you thought before was to ask you now, after seeing the documentary, if you have any slight shift in your thoughts.
It's still like the same thoughts. It would just be strange to me for there to be contact without it being like a lot bigger of a thing than just like, oh, we're going to sneak down, pick some people up off your planet, abduction and whatnot. I don't know. It's weird to me because like there's so much shit just floating around in space in general that it's just like, well, look at that. It's moving erratically. It's like, yeah, that's weird. I guess the term UFO is just unidentified flying object. That makes sense, but
yeah.
Now I don't think it swayed me, but
well, now they also use UAP,
Yeah.
unidentified aerial phenomenon.
yeah,
I think initially when I first had seen it, I was like, wow, this is strange. This is creepy. Our main character, Christo, he's very, he makes a lot of claims. The first claim is he has hundreds and thousands of hours of unidentified flying object footage over Monterey Bay, California. And you interspersedly see the film, and it's like whatever, it's lights in the sky, this, that, whatever. And he makes a lot of claims that seem outrageous. So he has the footage. Like I said in the intro, he claims to have made contact with a UFO that made him publicly defecate on
a golf course.
Not once but twice. He then claims 3 weeks later a man spontaneously combusted on that same golf course and died. He claims that he was contacted at age 8 by aliens in the form of Bullwinkle that told him they would bite him on the nose, and that his baby brother then pressed all of the soiled diapers on the window to keep something out. He claims that his dog was attacked by wolf hybrids. He claims that he directed 2 feature films and at one point was going to have Pinhead in one of his films. And he also claims that his dog was in Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's kind of front-loaded with all of this very strange stuff this guy is claiming. And what we start to see is all of these outrageous claims that he makes actually have validity to them. And it starts to make the case it's very well done documentary where it starts to feel like we have to take the stranger things that he talks about more and more seriously because he doesn't seem to be a liar. Everything he says is basically true. Up to the UFO footage, he does have footage of stuff.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is.
We don't know anything about the Bullwinkle thing. So
we can't verify that. But there was a man who did catch fire, was running down the golf course, and then died from his being on fire. His dog was attacked. There's news evidence of this. He did direct 2 featured horror films. He did have letters of commitment from all of these famous horror actors. He has photos of him meeting people like Linda Blair and Peter Jackson, and his dog was the jailer dog from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Just so fucking funny.
And it makes this case where he's such a likable guy. Christo is such a very likable character. He's very eccentric, and it's easy to see him as this kind of out there personality who's just a conspiratorial person. But
I think that's just the nature of conspiracy theorists. They just seem out there all the time, no matter what. It's just the nature of being that person. You make all these claims, and people are like, "Oh, he probably didn't actually see that." Everything else he says is true. It's like, well, shit.
This is probably my favorite documentary, of all time, because it brings you in with the UFO stuff, just as a bait and switch. And what it becomes is a really interesting case study of him as a person and how he got to this point in his life, because he does have a pretty horrific life at times. His life story is very sad, and it pulls on a lot of themes of not regret, but he has a lot of he's basically been dealt one of the worst hands throughout his life, and he doesn't seem stopped by it. He continues to make meaning and make belief in all of himself, all these things around him, the people around him, and he's really trying to make his imprint on humanity to some degree. And that's really what the story ends up being. he talks a lot about, when he talks about these things, he doesn't, it's called Curse of the Man Who Sees UFOs, but he doesn't really see it as that. He constantly talks about how privileged and how blessed he is to be able to see these things, which I feel like is different from what people usually say, is like it's this scary thing, and like, you know, it kind of really gets into people's heads to be interacting with things that you can't explain, whether it's aliens or not. But he always is talking about how privileged, how blessed he is, how excited it makes him, how happy it makes him.
Yeah, he, especially with like having seen them since his childhood, like it's always been a thing for him. For most people, like you said, they talk about these situations like scared, freaked out, and he like is just so excited every time. Every video you could tell, like, where he's talking in it, you can tell how excited he is, and how excited he is to talk to others about it. Even
That's one of the other things, is like he's such a draw because he's very like off the cuff, where he gives them all names because they all have different personalities, and if you watch the footage that is presented, there's pretty consistent like things, like certain ones flash certain colors, certain ones are certain shapes, certain ones appear in certain formations. So he calls them, some of the names are Stinkleberries, which he named when he was drunk eating olives stuffed with blue cheese. Eggmans, the real McCoys, Woowoos.
Woowoos. That's because that's the sound the dog makes.
Yeah, when they come around, the dogs go woo woo around them. It's so, one of the other interesting aspects is the documentarian Justin starts to frame Monterey Bay and California at large as this very interesting hotspot of like, look around you and notice how strange things are. And one of the things that you kind of get throughout is him talking to other people, which he loves talking to people. He just, on the street, there's a hilarious scene where they're driving around and he sees a homeless man like asking for money, and he goes up to him. He's very like old school hippie in a way, where he constantly is talking about like, there's these big houses, and he's like, yeah, what would aliens think if they flew over India and saw people, you know, living in squalor, and then they came and saw all these giant houses with nobody living in them. And he goes up to this homeless man and he's like, hey man, do you want something to eat? And the guy's like, yeah. And he like, I think he gives him money or he gives him food. And then he goes, hey, do you believe in aliens? So he just takes every opportunity he can to talk about like aliens with people. And a lot of the people he talks to, whether it's like off the cuff, like people on the street, or like people he knows personally, they've all had some weird experience that they are willing to talk about.
He brings it up at one point too. I think whenever they're at the beach looking, and a lady walks by and he asks her, and she like immediately and he start talking about aliens, wanted nothing to do with it, and he's just like, yeah, these people who like believe in a higher power just like get offended the moment you start talking about it. And it's like, I would think that not necessarily getting offended, but mostly whenever you'd ask somebody about it, like you'd get a lot of people like, oh no, I've never experienced, but the amount of people that are like, I've experienced that. The one thing that whenever he was talking to two people, I think they were walking outside of his house, it was Lydia and Erwin, I think their names were.
When he's screaming at the sky in the middle of the road.
Yeah. The one thing that I like, he was asking them if they saw it, but then it kind of like, I don't know, I was watching a show with lawyers in it, so I was going to say it's like a leading question where he's like, did you see it change from orange to red? And they're like, oh yeah, I saw that too. Like,
yeah, that is one of the things, is he's a very confident man, and he does ask people very like leading questions. Like there's even like older people that he's friends with, and he kind of like, there's this scene, they go to a local Mexican restaurant and he's talking to the owner, and he's like they're talking through a time where they had both experienced seeing a UFO, and he's asking him very, very leading questions, and the guy's just like, yeah, sure.
Well, at the start too, he asked him, and the guy's like, I haven't told anybody this. he's like, I was afraid everybody would think I was a freak.
Yeah. it's a shadow of a doubt thing where he's, are these people kind of going along with it because they see his conviction and like they don't want to potentially offend him by just being like, it was weird, but I don't really care. But he has a very infectious personality, and it comes out when he's talking to people, and I feel like people are more willing to buy into it because he has such a like big personality. It's hard to, at times, there's the balance of, do you want to believe him or do you not want to believe him? Because he talks about some things where like it is more conspiratorial. Like at one point he talks about like chemtrails from airplanes, or he starts, there were filming around the time the Malaysian jet disappeared, and he's like, yeah, I just go on YouTube and I look for evidence and I kind of decide what I do or do not believe. But then he also acknowledges like, yeah, there's a lot of people out there who are just looking to scam you into believing whatever they want. So he's given to you as this really eccentric person. Like, he's calling the documentarian like every single day, multiple times a day, leaving him voicemails of like sightings he's seeing. They rent a hotel space to go over footage, and at one point he just gets warm and goes to the pool, strips down, and just jumps in. Like, all these little, like, just, not that he doesn't have social graces, but he's just a very free spirit. It's very fun to watch him.
That hotel, just in general, was like, the room was so extravagant. Like, he's like, yeah, this is a place where you review alien footage. Like, it really cracked me up there.
When we kind of dive into him as a character, and why it ends up not really being about UFOs, and it ends up being about him. You get the idea that he's very closed off for personal reasons. UFOs are a big thing. He loves talking to everybody about UFOs. UFOs are how he connects to the world, and to some degree, it's the mark he wants to leave on the world. But when you start to hear his story, you start to understand why he is so invested in these things.
To the point he even calls them his brothers from like another planet, and yeah, it really becomes a story about the tragedy of life and growing old without kind of leaving an impact on something. And it's a man trying to make meaning and find some way to be included into people's lives. We even see one of the interviewees, Dennis Deacon. He's been friends. They had been friends for, I think he said, like 35 years. They were old school punks back in California. They were both in bands, and Christo would make these really elaborate like war-like stage shows because he works in horror movies. So he still works in horror movies. But the music he makes too is like, it's perfect for what he thinks he sees all the time as well. Well, I think it inspires him to make the music, but
yeah, to kind of take a little sidetrack. Yeah, he makes like ambient noise,
space sounds.
Yeah, and he has the weirdest process too. Like they show him live sampling. I don't know what it is. It's this giant stringed instrument.
I think it was like the inside of a piano.
That's what I was thinking.
At first I thought it was a harp, and I was like, I think that might be pianos.
The wires were way too thick a gauge to be a harp.
Yeah.
But he's sitting there sampling it with like an iPad, and he's hitting it with tongs, like metal tongs.
Mm-hmm. There's like a fork stuck in the middle of it too.
Yeah, and he's just like, he's making these really weird sounds, and he samples them, and then he also takes photos of the UFOs from the film, and he turns it into a spectrograph, which is, you can turn a picture into sound waves, and then he uses the sound waves in his music, and he claims that the music he makes attracts the UFOs to him.
He plays it really loud, really, really loud, so that they get drawn to him.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting like concept.
That's the thing is, he has such a, whether it's, you see like him making the films, you see him making music, he has such a creative mind. Like, even his setups, he was talking about one of the pieces of equipment is like a bunch of microchips from old Commodore computers that are like work as oscillators for his music making. And it's just, he's not crazy.
No.
He's there.
He's a smart guy.
He's a very creative person. But yeah, one of the first thing that you really start to see as part of the tragedy of his life is he talks about Janelle. And at first he doesn't really talk about, he just says, my wife passed. And then you grow to realize the circumstances surrounding what happened. And the big reveal, the big like emotional point of the movie is they're visiting the theater where his two films premiered. Specifically the one that really garnered a lot of interest. And he goes into the theater where it premiered, and this is where you start to really see, like, this is where you get the moment where, like, he did meet all of these famous people. He did have letters of commitment. He actually did have a feature film that was funded by people. And they're walking away from the theater because he has this really emotional reaction in the theater. He starts, like, crying. And the documentarian's like, I'm trying to understand, like, why he had such an emotional reaction, which to some degree is natural. Like, it would make sense. But then they're walking across the street, and Christo turns to the camera and he goes, and this is the bank where my brother stole $129,000 from my bank account, ran off with it, and it ends up being, it was the money that he inherited from when his dad was killed by a drunk driver, and all of the circumstances surrounding what happened to him from that point on in life. He talks about after the money was embezzled, his brother ran off, never contacted him again. He tried to contact his brother through his mom, and his mom disowned him. And he reads one of the letters, which is disgusting.
Yeah, it's awful.
And then at the same time, when this is going on, his wife finds out she has cancer, and she needs what at the time would have been probably extremely experimental. He said like it needed like micro robot surgery to go in and take care of it, and he couldn't afford it because his brother had just embezzled all this money from him. So you start to see where this man is given circumstances where he should be going crazy. Everything is being taken away from him. His money, his financial like security, his ability to fund any kind of creative endeavors, which he's starting to gain momentum on. Like he talks about when his dad died, he was in culinary school, and he didn't finish culinary school because he wanted to pursue movies. And then when his dad died, he kind of, used the money to fuel his passion, and he was gaining esteem and whatever. And then that was pulled out from under him. His family abandons him, and his wife dies of cancer.
And he calls his mom too and asks her for the money, and like her only response is just, that wouldn't be appropriate at this time.
Yeah, and then she calls the cops on him.
Yeah, and to call them to call him and say not to call her ever again. It's really sad. I mean, there's a saying that the procedure would have been a success and that his wife would still be alive. You don't really know which way that would go. He even gets to the point where he starts stating like the only family he had died. It was his dad, and the viewers are his family. Those lights in the sky are his family. That he has this like such an emotional connection to just everybody else because of the lack of connection from like his mother and brother, and like it's really kind of like touching, like you said, beautiful. It's sad, but
yeah, he talks about towards the end. He says, I don't want to die not having done something for somebody. And he's talking about like that's why he wanted to make movies, that's why he wanted to make music, that's why he's filming all these UFOs and trying to make a film using all of his footage. And that's kind of like part of obviously why I wanted to talk about it on this, is he's really struggling with his own, I want to say, mortality to some degree. Like he's interacted with death so often, and he's had a lot of the opportunities he could have had taken away from him. Like he could have gone to could have finished culinary school. He could have been like a B movie horror director, which isn't necessarily going to pay the bills, but like that's his passion. He could have been happily married if his wife's surgery would have been successful. He could have had a family beyond just him and his wife if his brother and mother hadn't betrayed him. And he's trying to make meaning of all of these things and understand how, even with all of these barriers, he can still do something substantive. And it ends up just being UFO footage.
Yeah. And a documentary about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, I don't know. It's something about it really speaks to me. Like, I really enjoy films or narratives about people who become really like hyper fixated or obsessed on garnering some kind of success through like a singular medium. Whiplash, jazz drums, Birdman, theater, Frank, music, something like this, where it's just this guy dealing with these really heavy like feelings of making meaning and leaving an imprint and being someone that isn't just a crazy person, but like may have genuinely given evidence of some kind of groundbreaking scientific discovery. Yeah, I don't know. It just really, like I said, this is like my favorite documentary, and I try to tell everybody to watch it because I think it's that powerful.
Yeah, I'd never even heard about it until you said we were going to watch it. And I said I was going to jokingly be like, oh, I watched Signs on accident.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So let's talk about something related to Signs in a way.
The crop circles.
Yeah. So and this is one of those things where it kind of casts certain shadows on, I don't want to say his legitimacy, but like during the filming, there ends up being a crop circle popping up. And he's so excited where he's just like, they're saying some lady saw this getting mowed. He's like, no, this is too intricate. You can't mow that. And then he's like, look, all of the reeds or grass are laid down. They're not broken. That's not a mower. And it seems like it's this very exciting thing that just happened during.
He gets really mad that they say it was man-made. Like, he gets very upset about it. He's like yelling at the TV and yelling at the news. That cracked me up. But he brought it up also. He said, like, with the crop circle looked like a sensor in a camera. So he's like, they know I'm filming it. Like,
Exactly. And that was one of the things that the documentarian kind of inserts at that point is he's like, is he just connecting these loose ends? Because it seems very like, people love saying like main character syndrome type thing, where it's like, they know I'm filming them. They put a crop circle that looks like the chip that's in my camera to signal to me that they know that I'm filming them. And it just seems very like, okay, yeah, he seems to be tying up a lot of strange loose ends. Like, you could even say the thing with, you know, his golf course
foul instance, yeah.
And the man catching on fire is, it seems like, I mean, to any rational person, that's two very unrelated things that just happen in close proximity to each other. But to him, it means something. And the crop circle kind of ends up being like a through line to certain degrees, where they keep touching on it. So initially it's him being like, it's real. How don't you see this? And then he says it looks like a camera sensor. And then there's a farm, Swank Farm, that says they did it. They made it happen. And he's like, yeah, but here's the thing is, if you Google or try to search for Swank Farms, nothing shows up. There's no website, there's no phone number, you can't contact them. So he's like, so yeah, that makes total sense, is this Swank Farms just appeared out of nowhere and made a crop circle, but you can't get a hold of them in any way.
I also, like, going into, you know, it did look like a chip, like a microchip, but they've also stated that, like, their claims out there, like night vision technology came from Alien, Area 51, like technology from what we've learned from crashed alien crafts and everything. So, like, I mean, why not cut a chip into the farm? Like,
but then it turns out, so like towards the end of the film, and this is the conduit, or this is the reason that he starts to open up more personally and he reads the letter from his mom, is it ended up being a hoax. NVIDIA, the graphics card company, who's now apparently, I think, one of the top Fortune 500 companies
I didn't know that.
in the world now. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, they made it up to promote a new computer chip they were making. And he just loses it. He, like, because obviously that's kind of taking away something that's important to him, is he thought that was the evidence that he knew they were there, they knew he was there, and it ends up being a hoax. And like, I can imagine that's a big rug pull on, like, people put all of their time and they invest so much into this life's goal. Like, I'm going to call it a life savings, basically. You build up this life savings and then all of a sudden it's just ripped away from you, and you're left sitting there like, who am I without this stuff, and who am I with it? Like, what does it mean for me to be the person who's so heavily invested in something that's so not vilified, but it's made such a joke of, that a tech company is going to do something
as viral marketing.
As viral marketing, and then I fall for it.
The big break there too is like, he's had so many other rug pulls happen to him in his life. It's just like, just icing on the cake at this point, where he's like, in a bad way, I guess, but like, it's a, the straw breaks the camel's back, because he's like, this is real. I'm sure of it. And like you said, it's like, to him, communication from them that they see him. And then all of a sudden it's just like, nope. Nope, that's not what it is. It's a promotion.
It's really sad. And that's kind of the thing. Like I said, after that, he reads the letter from his mom where she disowns him and says horrible things about his dying wife. And it ends up being the last communication they've ever had.
Yeah, rightfully so, I think. Like, if I got that letter after a family member didn't help to try to save my wife, I'd probably never talk to them again.
Yeah. His life, that's kind of the big, like, instances of, like, things, like, these horrible things happening to him. And I think part of the wonderful thing about this documentary is he really tries to communicate how beautiful life is around you and how much of it to take in and not take for granted. He says he goes to this one beach in particular to really reflect, and like, he sits down and he meditates and like thinks about his life. And he talks about, like, in the documentarian kind of does some voiceover at this point, but he's like, like, look around and see the, like, you have these ancient structures from crumbled civilizations, and it takes place in Monterey Bay. So there's like a lot of there's a Steinbeck, the direct Steinbeck discussion about like the sardine canning factories in Cannery Row, and like all of the businesses that went out of business, which is the crumbling, like whatever I just said.
Yeah.
And all of the, like, the strange life forms that exist within like the tidal pools. And it's really funny. At one point he's talking about like these strange, unassuming creatures, and it cuts to a shot of a seal just like swinging its head around. But that's really what Christo seems to be trying to really communicate, is like, look around you. You probably won't see UFOs, but you're going to see something that you're really taking for granted. And like, maybe the only way that we really start to think of it like that is by the man who's screaming about, I'm going to flash prime numbers with the reflection of the sun off my glasses to bring about alien contact in the middle of the day.
The very eccentric moments of, like, the one time he was filming also, and he's literally just screaming for his neighbor.
That
Steve Lawrence.
That bothers, like, every time I watch that, it makes me want to curl into myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, oh,
it's like the middle of the night. He's screaming at the top of his lungs. Then they finally come out and he's like, we need to get 2 cameras on this. And they film it with their phones. He's like, thank you.
Yeah. The big, I guess, climax in terms of the main draw of the story is they show the footage of the 24-minute clip where it is easily the strangest thing he's captured, where 2 orange lights appear and then it goes to from 2 to 4, from 4 to 5, and then from 5 to 6.
Yeah, that part was real crazy.
And during this, and he makes a point to say this throughout, but you can see planes flying by. You can see other like celestial objects. You can see clouds, all these things. But these 6 lights make triangles in the sky. Some of them stay like static while others are moving around him. They're shifting positions. And he gets 24 minutes of this footage.
He like even pulls up like star charts and everything too, just to be like, look, those don't exist on this.
One of the nights, the documentarian Justin and Christo have an experience.
Yeah, that was a really cool moment too, because like I'm interested to see if Justin, or knowing if Justin is like more of a believer now. Like, does he go and look for these more now?
The only thing I saw, because like I tried to do a little research, and it's a documentary, so you just get all the information. But the one thing I did read was, I guess originally he had planned, I don't know if it was a follow-up or just it would be additional scenes within the documentary, where he would try to like explain the experience they had. And he was like, he basically said he abandoned it because he didn't want there to be an explanation. Like, he wanted to just have that moment that he'll never forget and never be able to explain.
Even in, like, at the moment when they were having the experience, he like starts like, oh, could it be like a ship mat? And then he said that even he convinced himself, like, no, there's no way it could be that. Like,
yeah, Christo says, if that was the top of a ship, if that was a shipboat light, like, look at it comparative to all the lights on the hill.
Yeah,
that would have to be a huge light.
Yeah,
like, it's not, and how it's moving, it's not a ship.
And it wouldn't be that high up in the sky also. Like, from their angle, it would be lower. Like, you'd see it on the backdrop, the mountains behind it, which you didn't really get that. It's up.
It's one of those things, whether, and it's the tough thing about recommending this documentary and like talking about it is, I am not trying to convince people that UFOs are real, because I myself am not convinced about UFOs.
Yeah.
I am not necessarily convinced by the footage that is shown. It is compelling to some degree. It's strange.
It's interesting for sure.
It's real. It is. It's interesting. But beyond all that, like, the UFOs really aren't the main. They're not what you should get out of this movie.
It's a what do you call it? The bait and switch. You know, watch this about UFOs, and then you learn about Christo and just everything he's dealt with.
Yeah, I love this documentary. I think I've definitely watched it more than any other documentary. Every so often, I just throw it on because I just want to watch Christo. And I think he has like a show now.
Oh, nice. I need to find it, because I would totally just watch him have a UFO show.
I'm pretty sure it's just called The Man Who Sees UFOs.
Oh, okay.
Cursory glances, I saw that he was involved with something. I don't know what, but
I'd be friends with him. I want to be his friend.
He would be so much fun to just, like, if nothing else, because he's going to be like, all right, hold on, right there.
Yeah, check that shit out.
They're right there.
They're looking right at us.
It's like, I don't know what, they're right there. Just check. It's like, all right.
I just want to I want to see his music making process. Like, I would totally be friends with him, just to like shoot the shit, be like, yeah, I'll just hang out while you make music. Like,
yeah. And that's like I said before, like, that is the most compelling thing, is he's a very charismatic, very caring. Like, he clearly cares about not only the people in his life, but like even people he only kind of knows. Like, he has all these interactions and connections with people in Monterey. Like, he's a very compassionate person. Like, you can't just write him off as some loon,
some weirdo.
Yeah, because he is such a nice person, and he has such a compelling story. And usually on here we talk about like narratives and movies, things that have like a very linear story that we can kind of talk about. But this is really like, while there is somewhat of a narrative and a storyline because of the events that unfold, it really is just a like heartbreakingly beautiful story about a man who was just beaten down in life and still comes out on the other side, maybe a little unhinged,
but positive still.
Yeah, he's even though he sees UFOs and that's what he's trying to make his claim to fame, like, it brings him joy. it's his connection to everybody else around him. Like it's a beautiful story.
I definitely liked it a lot. I'll probably watch it more and show it to people as well because, like I said, just the guy in general is charismatic, and if he does have a show, I'd want to look for that too because I would just watch him follow these lights around.
Yeah, and it is just funny because like I kind of wish I would like I could be there when people actually like watch it because in the first 5 minutes is where he talks about the golf course.
Yeah,
And it, like at that point, it's so easy for I can imagine anybody just being like, "What are we watching?"
Yeah, what the hell is this?
Like,
just wait.
Yeah, but yeah, highly recommend it. Like I said, it's my favorite documentary of all time. I don't know. What do you generally? I know it seems like you've had positive thoughts.
I really liked it. I really, again, not to keep repeating myself, but I really like Christo in general. I do have a favorite documentary, which also could fit in the cast as well, and it's just Harmontown. But that's such an interesting one. We could talk about that at a different time, though. But I definitely recommend this, whether you're a skeptic or a believer in UFOs, or just like flat out not even skeptical and just like no, they don't exist. This is worth watching just because like the footage that is shown is so hard to explain at all of what it could be without just being like, well, no, it definitely is a UFO at that point because we don't know what it is. Very interesting. And again, like you said, it's very, very touching whenever you do learn Christo and about his struggles and tribulations that he's dealt with in his life. So yeah, it's impactful.
Yeah. I wrote 5 pages of notes. But he is just such a it's such a compelling story that it's really easy to just kind of get lost in talking about. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, first documentary down. There's a couple others I'd really like to.
Documentaries?
Yeah. There's you ever see, I think, a Jim and Andy?
I know of it.
Yeah, that and I don't know if this would fit.
That's the one with Jim Carrey and Andy Kaufman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a...
Have you ever watched Man on the Moon?
No.
Where he plays Andy Kaufman?
No, but that's what the documentary revolves around, him doing that.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. No, I should watch that. And then there's Jim and Andy. There's one called the Barclay Marathons, which is insane. I don't know if that would necessarily fit into this, except for like it's a Sisyphean feat of like it's an ultra marathon and it's just insane. Maybe I'm breaking new ground.
The only marathon movie I want to watch is Patriots Day with Mark Wahlberg.
All right, until next time, folks. It's been real. It's been fun.